ta'ala to bring these situations to an
Imam,
end.
let me ask you just about another misconception, because you were talking about women earlier.
Yes.
How are you, I mean, what is your approach to dealing with the people who keep raising the issue incorrectly that Muslim women are oppressed, that Islam oppresses women?
Well, here in this center, per se, you know, this center, we receive about 300 visiting groups coming from universities, colleges, high schools, elementary schools, from churches, synagogues, from so many institutions in the country. And we take the opportunity every time, you know, to explain to them that Muslim women are not oppressed. And the proof is that they themselves insist on wearing their hijab. They insist on wearing their, you know, their loose clothes which cover every part of their body with the exception of their hands and face. It is their insistence, it is not the insistence of their husbands or their parents, for example. It is, and this has been seen, you know, for example, in Paris and London and other places and here, you know, that Muslim women would go out in demonstrations, you know, asking for nobody to interfere, you know, in their affairs, that they insist on having the hijab. Why should anybody think that they are being forced to wear the hijab? They are not forced, but because they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they love their religion, they would like to obey Allah, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what's wrong in that? So this is what we are explaining to our visitors, and of course these visitors would explain it to others, you know. This is the message that we, and sometimes Christian women who have converted to Islam, they themselves, you know, come to our center in order to explain to the visitors, to the non-Muslim visitors, to explain to them that they were non-Muslim and they converted to Islam and they insist on wearing the hijab. So the hijab is something optional. They chose it. They chose it and they insist on it. They want it. And they say sometimes, you know, I heard one Muslim woman say this, you know, who converted to Islam. She said, it's not the hijab which, the hijab does not restrict a woman's freedom. On the contrary, the hijab gives her full freedom. You know, the hijab is the title of the freedom of woman, because she is free to worship Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. She is free from you know, those desires and from this way of life which makes them swerve and deviate from Allah's guidance and from the true path of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala.
Okay, Imam, thank you very much for your time, but I just have one final question for you.
Yes.
Now, you've been in the United States for a number of years, and you've been the Imam, and you've probably traveled around. I want to ask you, from your perspective, what do you think is the outlook for the future of Islam in America?
Well, I think, you know, as things come to normal, back to normal in the Middle East, things will come back to normal in the United States. At the present moment, because there is a lot of emotion, you know, and passion, you know, maybe against Muslims. Whenever an American soldier is killed in Iraq, people are angry here, are sad, you know. But once these problems come to an end, the situation in the United States will also come back to normal. And people will have the chance, will have the opportunity to look into Islam once again, and to have a neutral look into Islam without being influenced, you know, by any prior influences or any ideas against al-Islam. They neutrally will look into Islam and will choose for themselves. And I think, you know, the numbers of those who convert to Islam will double. You know, the only thing that we need is that the Middle East goes back to normal. Once